I've been going through sort of a spiritual journey where I've always wanted to figure out, like, how do you turn tragedies into something positive? Like, how do you turn a negative experience into a positive reflection? And this, I mean, you can't get more tragic than you know, young people losing their lives through gun violence. And it was just me. It wasn't anyone else. I know I have a lot of names in the credits, but it was initially just myself with a camera, the same camera I'm using to record this interview. I got on a bus with a bunch of strangers who were at, you know, 1 o'clock in the morning after a Sunday night, Monday morning. And all of us were anticipating what was going to happen. It was maybe half full, which I think made it perfect for production because it wasn't overly crowded, but at the same time gave us enough space to breathe. I didn't know anyone. I had to gain the trust of 40 different individuals on a bus. And it wasn't easy, but you know what? I thought, let me give it a shot. I'll just make an announcement. I'll make sure I have the contractual okay from everyone that's involved with the bus and everything. But after I went through that red tape, it really came down to just gaining the trust of everyone on that bus.
Upon seeing the footage of the 2 protests, it was the Rally for Tally, which took place at the Florida State Capitol, and also the ride there on the bus. There was a bus ride to the first protest, and then we had the Parkland protest. To find the protagonist, we found the most interesting person, and that is the person who, you know, said she was thinking about running for office. As we basically found the story, we focused on her. You know, there was a lot of footage basically of the protests. There was a lot of B-roll news footage types, and our job was to find the story within the story. So once we found our protagonist, we decided that was the most compelling story because there were about 3 or 4 other sort of, you know, people in there that we had footage for, that we had interviewed, that Adam had interviewed, but she was the most compelling because she was a single mom, and therefore it would hit her young son. So we decided to focus on her and, you know, go back and get some footage where we wanted to get some interviews with her. We said, look, you know, this isn't good enough. This, like, you know, as a documentary, we have B-roll, we have news footage, but what we need is to go into the vulnerabilities and insecurities and of somebody who's actually doing something for the first time. So that was the compelling story, right? It wasn't about like the actual event. That was more of the backdrop, but what was interesting was sort of like, what does somebody go through when they've never done something before for the first time? They're sacrificing, you know, their family, they're sacrificing their friendships, they have to come up with all this money, and they're going against like a political machine. And, you know, as an underdog, a typical David and Goliath story. So that was sort of what we wanted to pull out of it, you know, and I think it was pretty powerful. The biggest challenge of the film, but it was by no means like a negative. It's a very positive, it's part of the filmmaking experience, is the discovery process. I mean, you have a documentary, you have this footage, you don't know what you're gonna do, you try all these things, and you have to try things, and some things work and some things don't. And eventually, you know, you come to sort of, you latch on something like a story idea, an emotion, and you build that and you carry it through. And that is the most challenging process, but it's also the most enjoyable. You know, just the storytelling and pulling out the conflicts, pulling out like the, you know, sort of the emotions of the characters and what's going on. Yeah. What I think makes a story more compelling and for the viewer is these universal themes. We had a lot of footage, like a lot of like, you know, slogans, a lot of, you know, branding against certain organizations that we could have used in the film, but we decided against it because ultimately, you know, we see that already on CNN and Fox. You know, we don't need that in a documentary. Like, we need to talk about the person. And I think at the end of the day, that if that gets the viewer sort of more focused on, you know, who this person is and can relate to this viewer, you know, empathize with this viewer, then, you know, all that other stuff will come into play like on its own, and you know, the viewer can take whatever they want with the debate around the topic.
So we're here at the march as a family to make sure that this doesn't happen again for him and for all the other kids. It's time. Silence is no longer an option.
Enough is enough. Enough is enough. Enough is enough.
When I started thinking about running, they try to warn you about the amount of money that you have to fundraise, that you have to fundraise against. I have to raise money for a house, to buy a house in cash. Yeah, that's a lot of money.
I found that the least amount of questions you ask in a documentary of your subjects, I think the more forthright the more honest, the more secure they're going to be with their answer. You know, you can ask them 1,000 questions and they're going to probably feel manipulated. They're going to think you're going to edit out the stuff you need or the stuff you don't need, and edit in the stuff you need and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, I just wanted to gain their trust, tell their story, and find some gems in there.
Initially, we had this idea of staying true to the debate of the superficial aspects of the debate. And that was something that we were going to try, and it didn't work because we decided that we needed to tell a more personal story. One thing we would do is, or I would do, is I would print out like stills, and I would just throw them on the floor. I think Walter Murch did this, or I got this idea from an editor, and he said, look, forget the script, we're just going to print out stills, and we're going to throw it on the floor, and we're just going to kind of rearrange it based on like the visuals. So that's one thing you do. You know, you find the core of the story. And for us, the core of the story was the emotional component of the protagonist, of the single mother, and her fears and her vulnerabilities and her sort of indecisiveness of, you know, this isn't a person who decided that she's going to do something and it was all gung-ho. I mean, she had apprehensions about it, she had second thoughts, and we decided to sort of just construct the story around that, her emotional arc, basically. So everything around the film had to serve that. I mean, we basically set up the world, you know, we did that, and then go into the story of the individual. That's the most important thing.
One of the things I like most about short films is that it's one of the places where you're not as restricted to the storytelling the way you are with a feature. Most features have like certain plot points and beginning, middle, and end that you have to hit by certain times, otherwise you're going to lose your audience. Generally, I mean, whereas in short films, if you have compelling characters, if you have a compelling storyline, you can get away with breaking the rules a little bit more, and that's a lot of fun for me. With And the Brave Shall Rise, the film starts off being about these social activists, and so somewhere in the midpoint, it becomes a story of Cindy Polo, who represents everything that these social activists are fighting for. It's almost like out of this great bunch of socially active human beings comes this leader who fights the system, and I love that. I love how I wasn't constrained to all the rules of a feature. I could just allow the characters to tell the story, and you know, I obviously have to edit out some of the stuff that doesn't belong, but I just never felt like I had to follow any rules. I just chose to tell the story as best as I thought, and without really looking at rules, more about what compelled me.
I think short films serve a purpose. I mean, especially now, obviously we have a broader market for it. You know, you can use them as calling cards, obviously, but I think it's gone way beyond that. You know, right now short films are a viable distribution opportunity because of, you know, the outlets we have, the streaming outlets. We have a lot more opportunity. We have a lot of established outlets right now, whether it be HD Shorts or other outlets out there. There seems to be a lot more support for it and a lot more appetite from the public. So I think it's great. The more the merrier, right?